I'm going to do some compositing using some green screen footage, or footage that's shot with a green backdrop. I'm going to composite a figure onto a beach background. Let me create a new composition and get started. HD TV at 25 frames per second, and I'm just going to add a bit of a blue background so that we can see transparency. And I'm going to make it, I don't know, pretty short so that we don't have to render too much. So you can see here that I've got our transparency mesh turned on there. I can turn that on and off here, and you can see that blue color that I've selected. Let's add the assets to the composition and kind of just get that arrangement set up. May as well drop both of those assets into the comp window, into the timeline like so, and you can see that we've got our figure at the front there, and I might just adjust the scale. I think it should be around about 50%. Perfect. Let's have a look at the beach in the background there. And just have a look at the beach. So we've got a few lapping waves there, and then on top we've got this woman with her headphones on dancing around. Now it's that footage with the green in the background is a pretty large file, so it might be helpful when you're trying to preview and just to get fluidity of your workflow up. Drop the render quality there. But of course, when you are checking to see that you've got an edge or you've got good transparency, it's probably best to view that and make decisions on that in full res. Okay, so this is some stock footage that I've got from Pexels, and it's pretty good looking green screen footage in that the green background is pretty consistent and well lit, and the figure is also well lit. If you're shooting your own green screen footage, it's important that you have a nice flat green background immediately around your subject, and it's important that it is well lit and that there's no shadows from falling onto the background from your subject. So it often requires being independently lit with its own kind of lighting sources. Okay, we're going to use a plug-in or an effect, I suppose. It ships as part of the built-in After Effects plugin, and it's called Keylight. So let's apply Keylight to our green screen footage, and we can go up under Effects. Better select our footage, and under Effects we'll go to Keying. You can see that there's a bunch of different keying tools, but Keylight 1.2 is a pretty good place to start. And you can see that the effect has loaded up into our effects panel here. Now, the first thing that we'll do is we'll just have a quick look at the different views that you can have. So currently we have final result selected. We can select the source, so without any keying applied to it. We can also have a look at the matte or you can look at the screen matte or the transparency that we've created with Keylight. Now let's go to the screen color, and we can use a color picker to decide on an area in our background to use as our color matte. And before I do that, I'm just going to turn off the going to turn off the that background video just so that we can see the bright blue background. So I'm going to select the color picker and click somewhere in here, and you'll see pretty instantly that Keylight's managed to really remove quite a bit in a fairly detailed way that green background. So because of the kind of quality of the way that image is shot, Keylight can really pretty instantly take out a lot of that background green, and then we can composite our image over the top of whatever footage we require. So that's pretty nice and easy and nice and quick. Let's have a look at a few kind of settings that we can use to make some kind of adjustments and hopefully get a better key for our footage. First thing that I'll do is we'll go back into the view and just have a look at those different views in action. So we can go back and look at the source if required, and we can also look at the matte itself. So this is the transparency information that we're using, and so it's just like a layer mask in Photoshop. The white areas will show up our subject, and the black will hide it. Will hide that layer and create transparency. Now we can see that it's not a perfect black and white, and there's some work that we could do to make that a little bit better. Let's go ahead and look at the final result. Can't really kind of see that taking place. That's why we have these different kind of viewpoints to fine-tune things. So let's have a look at some of these settings that we can use to fine-tune and really kind of compress this matte or this mask closer to black and white, make those edges a little crisper. The black's a little blacker and the white a little lighter. We'll twirl down the screen matte section of properties, and this is where we can make some adjustments to the contrast of our black and white kind of mask here. So we'll clip the blacks and the whites. So we can slide these sliders backwards and forwards and push those darker pixels closer to black. You can see up here that it's moving closer to black, and we want to get it to a point where all of those white pixels are pushed out, and we've just got pure transparency here. So I'm thinking around about the 15 point mark for our black clip. Also, we'll click the white, so we'll try and take these greys towards white. So let's pull that down a bit, and you can see that we're clipping out those greys. And I might push it down to about the 80 point, or maybe a little bit more to really squeeze it. So you can see now that we've got a much better contrast in our mask there. A couple of other things that we can do here. We can shrink and grow our edge. So if we feel like there's a little bit of a halo that we want to account for, we can adjust the shrink and grow. I'm going to turn this onto the final result. Can't quite get to turning off that. That's what I wanted to achieve. Yes, I just want to pull back that edge just a little bit, just to cut into the figure a little bit using the shrink and grow, and maybe just a couple of pixels just to pull it in just a little bit, remove any halo. You can see when she turns around that it's doing pretty well to make a nice mask in that kind of quite curly hair there. It looks pretty good. Still picking out all of the these bits of cable. Screen softness. Now, just to make that edge a little softer, we can use the screen softness. I'll drag that up. You can see that does soften that edge a little bit. I don't want to go that far with that. Maybe around about, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, just to soften it off and make it look a little bit more natural. Okay, now let's turn on our background video and have a look at our character or our subject against that background. So we can apply kind of color corrections directly to this footage. So we could use like a curves adjustment, for example, to adjust the tonal range of the foreground figure, which might be an advantage at some stage. You just got to make sure that when you do apply a color adjustment like that, that it sits on top of the Keylight effect in the kind of effect stack there. You can do some color corrections to your foreground subject in Keylight itself using the foreground color correction set of options. And I feel like that she's just a little bit too kind of vivid. She looks a little bit like she's in the studio. I can see a bit of green around the place in the figure, and I just want to pull her kind of pixels back a little bit. So I'm going to enable the color correction for this footage, and I'm going to adjust the saturation to start with. So just to pull back the intensity of those colors in line with the background a little bit. So just drop that down. And somewhere around there, I feel like that's looking a little bit more natural compared to the background. Maybe even a little bit more. I might increase the contrast. So this is like a brightness and contrast adjustment in Photoshop. Maybe add a little bit of contrast and then a little bit of brightness as well. Maybe not quite that much. Anyway, I think she's kind of sitting in that space a little bit more naturally. The last thing that we can attempt to do is sometimes you find a little, oh, this is not the last thing, but another thing that we can do. Sometimes you find that a subject shot on a green background, depending on the lighting, might have a little bit of green spilling over the edges of the subject. In this case, it's not too bad. I can kind of see a little bit of green around the edges. We can actually pinpoint or specify the edges. So we can look at the color correction edges, and you can see there that if we apply any adjustments to the edges, they're going to be in this pretty narrow kind of band of adjustment. Let's have a look at the color correction, edge color correction properties, and we can turn that on and we can adjust all of these kind of parameters within this kind of edge that's being selected here. To open up that kind of area of adjustment, so to get a bit more kind of a few more pixels being adjusted around the edges, we can change. Well, first of all, you need to adjust the contrast. So just brighten that up a little bit so that we've got a little bit more ability to make adjustments, and also I think we need to expand that edge a little bit. So I'm going to soften the edges a bit and also grow that edge out a bit. So now you can see that we're kind of targeting more pixels on the edge there. And if I go back to our final result, you'll see that we'll be able to pull out or adjust maybe kind of 20 pixels inside the figure there. And so then we can go and adjust the saturation, contrast and brightness. And I'm just going to pull the saturation down just a little bit to try and make those edges just a little bit more neutral. So that's looking good. I might just preview that. We can finish off that video. So here's the final render, and you can see that Keylight does a pretty good job of removing backgrounds so that you can composite multiple pieces of footage together to create something fairly seamless.